Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi, Maseches Kinim. Maseches Kinim is comprised of just Mishnayos without Gemara, so it's 3 parakim. First parak has 4 Mishnayos, the second parak 5, followed by the third parak with 6, so a total of 15 Mishnayos. Kinim is plural for kan. We have a pasuk in the Torah, Ki yukare kan tzipor lefanecha, if you encounter a bird nest with birds. In rabbinic terminology, a kan or a cane refers to a pair of birds. Hence the name of the Masechta, Kinim, plural for cane. Cane is one, and Kinim is a multitude of pairs of birds. Interestingly, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos refers to Kinim as Gufei halachis. In fact, it pairs it together with Pischei Nida. Kinim Pischei Nida. Hein. These are the primary halachis, Gufei halachis. In contrast to Tkufais, all the mathematical calculations related to seasons, the gematriyos, all these numerical calculations. These are merely parparois, like anecdotals, add-ons, seasonings to the Torah. We have a nice gematria, but Kinim and Pischei Nida is different. They're considered Gufei halachis. Now, what's the Mishnah teaching us? So, the point is that you would think, you would entertain a notion that perhaps Al Masechta, which refers to all kinds of scenarios of mix-ups. So it's basically a Masechta which contains formulations and all kinds of solutions for birds that got mixed up. Birds that are chatos and oila, and each one has its own system, its own specific process, as we're going to see in a minute. And there was some kind of mix-up and confusion, how to go about solving that dilemma. So you'd think it's merely a compilation of numbers and mathematical calculations. So to the Pischei Nida system, which we had back in Erech, and a woman is confused regarding where she's holding in her count, whether it's Nida, whether it's Ziva. So we have all the halachis pertaining to resolving those mathematical confusions and dilemmas. You would think it's merely, a numbers type of presentation. But the answer is no. Hein Gufei halachis. These are the primary. This is the core of Chachmas Hashem, the expression of Hashem's wisdom. Furthermore, you actually see the exactness and preciseness that pertains to our holy Torah and mitzvahs, because we're going to see that at times you have to actually do away. You have to sort of sacrifice, be willing to do away with a large number of birds, even hundreds, lest you come to deviate even one iota from the bird's designated process. So you can't, I'll just do it a little different to salvage the bird. You can't do that. The Torah is given with exactness and precision. It's like, the computer, goes awry. You call down a technician, he opens it up. There's like 3 trillion circuits and wires, and he's looking. That one there is meant to go point this way instead of it's pointing that way. That's the thing that's throwing the whole computer off. So you see how, every little detail, every little halacha, how important it is, how consequential it is. One wire off throws off the whole system, right? So, kol sheken kal v'chomer when it comes to spiritual matters, right? If it's just one iota off the track, right? It's got to be exact, precise. So the chatas is meant to be done like a chatas, an oila like an oila. Hein gufei halachis, in order to generate the proper kapara, the proper effect in shemayim for the person bringing that carbon. Now, in general, we have 2 types of bird karbanos. We have the chatos ha'if, the chatos bird, and the oilas ha'if, the oila bird. Now, when would a person bring these birds? So there are 2 possible general scenarios. One is a donation and a dava. Nadava would be a pair of birds which are both karban oila. So it's a double oila. Whereas if it's a chayva, an obligatory offering, for instance, a person's a zav, a woman is a zava. A person entered the mikdash while he was tamei, a yeledis, a woman after birth. In all these situations, you can opt for a pair of birds if he can't, afford a behema. And actually, that the bird system applies to a zav v'zava even if they could afford. But when it comes to yeledis, when it comes to a person who sinned, who was in the mikdash when he was tamei, a person who swore for, in those cases, if you can't afford the animal, you can go down to the bird. In that case, the pair of birds is comprised of one chatas and one oil, and each one has to be processed accordingly. So we have kan chayva, so it's a pair which is obligatory, comprised of chatas and oil. We have kan nedava, a donation, which is a double oil. Now, what are the differences in which you would process the chatas bird versus the oil bird? So there are three primary differences. The chatas ha'oif gets a malika, which is not a complete cut through. So it's called einoi mavdil. The kohen, uses his thumbnail, flicks the head off from the back, but not a complete severance. The next step is the haza'ah. That's where he would spray the blood off the bird onto the wall of his mizbeach, and that's done lamata, below, downstairs, so to speak. So below the halfway line, there was a chut hasikra, red line, which encircled the entire mizbeach. So it would run along the mid-height of the mizbeach wall. So lamata means below that red mark, and lamala would mean above it. The hazah of the chatas ha'oif takes place below that red mark. And finally we have the mitzui, where he would actually squeeze the bird to the wall of his mizbeach, and the leftover blood would trickle down. So it would be malika, which is not a complete cut through, hazah, lamat, followed by mitzui. On the other hand, the oil ha'oif works differently. The malika is a complete severance, mavdil, yes, and it has no hazah, it has merely mitzui. So it would squeeze the bird onto the wall of the mizbeach, and that takes place lamala, above that red line. Now, what about animal karbanos? Not to get confused, it's exactly the opposite. One sort of beautiful parshanut, get that in a minute. So, when it comes to the blood of a chatos behema, that's applied lamala, up on the corners of the mizbeach, whereas the chatos ha'oif, his blood is lamata. By the oil, it's exactly the reverse. The blood of the oil ha'oif, as we said, is lamala. The blood of the oil behema is lamata. So I recall once hearing a beautiful pshat, something to the effect of that the chatas is meant for atonement. So yeah, the more visible it is, lamala, right? The more he gets an element of shame and embarrassment because look, he sinned. He has to bring a carbon, which is public spectacle, and that helps him, assists him in getting his kapara. If you can't afford it, generally the birds of the chayva is for a fellow who can't afford. So the Torah had compassion on him and let him sort of do it discreetly, hide it, lamata, in a less visible fashion. But the oil, it's exactly the opposite. You're donating. Oh, you're the fancy donor. So if it's a behema that you donated, keep it discreet, keep it, down on the bottom, less visible. But if it's oil ha'oif, well, you're not so haughty about, you're not so proud of it, it's just a bird. So there, the Torah wants to highlight his generosity. Look, he could afford, he only a bird, look what he's doing, he's donating it. How generous, how he's extending himself, and that's why it's done upstairs, so that people get inspired and follow his lead and his generosity. Okay, whatever it is, these are learned from Psukim, of course. Xeris HaKasav, sourced from Psukim. Rashi brings it here, and that's how you go about we're going to focus mainly on the birds. So as we said before, you can't really deviate. If there's any mix-up that occurs, the birds are pretty much doomed. You can't take your chances. You can't say, well, I'll do one upstairs or one downstairs. You might be doing the wrong one, the wrong place. So what happens? They're left to die. Lamisa. There's no other form of recourse. Okay, says the Mishnah. Chatas oif, that's the bird chatas nasis lamatam. So its blood is applied below the chut hasikra, on the bottom part of the mizbeach. Chatas behema, as opposed to the blood of a chatas behema, that's lamal, that's upstairs on the corners of the mizbeach. By the Eilah, it's exactly in the reverse. Eilah so'if nasis lamalam. The blood of the Eilah so'if goes on the upper half of the wall of the mizbeach. Eilah behema is downstairs lamata. If you switched in any of these, pasal disqualifies the card. So it's critical that you put it in the right location. Seder kinin kachu. So what's the system that pertains to birds? Ha-chayva, a kan chayva, which you bring on account of an experience like ziva, leda, an obligatory pair of birds is comprised of one and one. Echad chatas v'echad eilah. So you can't have two chatas, it's got to be one on one. Now, as we're going to see later, you can leave it unlabeled. You don't have to label them as you buy them. You could, but you don't have to. You can buy yourself a pair of birds for your chayva obligation, your fulfillment of your chayva, and you leave the designation for later, for the kayin as he's offering it. But even in that situation, you can't switch its destiny. Meaning, within this pair, one is meant for chatos, one is meant for oil. It's not yet been specified or identified. But you can't switch that designation. It's also considered, it's like a semi-designation. You have two birds, one of which has to be chatos, one oil. But here there's no issue of switching, of confusion, because it's still up in the air. You can still designate them as you go along. Okay? But the fact is, it's going to be one chatas, one oil. Echad, chatas, echad. But a donated pair of birds, ben adarim, ben adavis, different types of donations, kulan oilas. There, the pair is completely oila. Ezo neder. What exactly is the neder format? Ha'imar harei alai oila. He says, I am committed to bringing in oila. He's personally responsible. So, if the bird dies, he has to replace it. What's considered nedava? That's item based. He points to a pair. This is an oila. What's the halachic difference between the two? Ma bein nedarim l'nedavis. What's the difference between the two? Ella, rather like the shanadarim, that's a personal commitment. Mesu oinignavu. Suppose the birds died or disappeared, they were stolen, he has to substitute for them. Chayav b'achar yusnim, he's responsible because it's a personal obligation. Nedavis, on the other hand, which is an item-based commitment, look, as long as it's here, fine, but otherwise I don't have to replace it. Mesu oinignavu ein chayav b'achar yusnim. Return Talmud Bavli. Now start the mix-ups. Says Mishnah Beis. Suppose you have a chatas, a bird that had been labeled as a chatas. You try to keep it aside, and somehow you turn around and it jumped into the oila cage. Shenasavra ba'oila. This fell out two cages. In one he had the chatas, in one he had the oila, labeled and specified. So it's not the unspecified, the stuma that we spoke about before, which still lends and allows for further identification. Here it's been identified. This one was declared as chatas, this one is an oila, they got mixed up. You don't know which one is which. You can't take your chances. They're both doomed. You cannot proceed. Chatas shensara ba'oila. V'oila or an oila jumped into the chatas cage. Shensara b'chatas. Even if it's 1 to 10,000. You don't say it's nullified. You don't say nullification by birds. It's a baal chai, it's a living being. It doesn't become batal. Yamusukun, they all are left to die. There's no other solution. Next scenario, chatas. You have a labeled chatas, a bird that had been designated as a chatas. Shenasara got mixed into b'chayva, a pair of birds that were designated on account of an obligation, but they were as yet unlabeled. what we call stuma, unspecified. So for example, you have one chatas jumping into a pair of chayva. One is going to be a chatas, one is going to be an oila. Now you have three, you don't know what's what. But you do know that there is a definite chatas amongst them, so you cannot do oila at all from this mix. Because you might encounter the chatas. That cannot be redesignated. You can't relabel it. So the oila option is off the table. That's gone. I'd like to do a chatas. How many can I do? Can I do 2? No. Because here comes the next rule. You cannot take a chance of exceeding, of possibly going beyond the limit of the original allotment in that pair. Simple logic, right? Because if you do 2 chatas and you don't know what you're doing, which one you're choosing, because they're unlabeled, unidentifiable, you might actually be encountering the original 2 and making 2 chatas from a pair which are meant to be 1 and 1. So that's the ongoing recurring formula here. You cannot take a chance of exceeding the original limit, the original allotment in that original pair. And the same formula would apply likewise irrespective of numbers. That's the concept behind most of this Masechta. You have to take care not to tamper, you have to exceed the original proportion, the original ratio. Okay, so once we have that concept clear, it's going to really aid us in understanding pretty much the whole Masechta. It's just in different variations, different formats, but that's the recurring theme here. We start, with a simple, basic scenario, and then it gets more and more advanced, more and more complex, but it's pretty much the same concept, recurring and recurring. So we have a chatas that had been labeled as chatas. Shenasar b'chayva, jumped into a chayva, a pair of birds which had been not yet been labeled, but it had been designated for chayva purposes, one of which is going to be a chatas, one of which is an oila. You can do it either way. But of those 2, one is chatas, one is going to be an oila. Now you have 3 together. What do you do? Ein kosher el kaminin chatosh b'chayva. So, oila you can't do at all, because you might be encountering the one that just jumped in, which was a chatas. So oila is off the table. How many chatas do you do? Ein kosher el kaminin chatosh b'chayva. You're only allowed to do based on the number of the original group, the original pair, meaning 1 chatas at most. As many chatas as you had in the original chayva, you can do that, but not more than that. And likewise, if there was an oila that jumped into a pair, same idea, just exactly the opposite. So we had an oila, jumped into a pair of unspecified birds, one of which is destined for a chatas, one for an oila. Now you have 3 birds together, one of which is a definitely labeled oila. You can't do anything other than oila anymore. You can't even take a risk of doing 1 chatas. You might be bumping into that oila. So chatas is off the table. How many oila can you do? Based on the amount of oila in the original unspecified group, which is 1. Ein kosher el kaminin oila sheb'chayva. And this concept applies irrespective of how many numbers, how many birds we have. It's going to be the same point. Make sure that you stay within the limits, within the allotment of that original group. Bein shechayva meruba, whether the unspecified birds were many, were numerous, or and the one that jumped in, the oila was, few in numbers, 1, 2, 3, or exactly the opposite. Numbers don't change this concept. You have to stick within the original allotment of that unspecified group. Bein shechayva meruba, whether the oila factor here is big, is large, many oilas jumped into a small number of chayva. So whether the same exact numbers, the same rule would apply. So let's take the last example. Same equal numbers. Let's say you have a pair of unspecified, again, which means that one is meant for a chatas, one meant for an oila. You have 2 carbon oila jumping into them. So you have 4. So chatas is not an option anymore, because you might encounter the imported, the guests who are oila. So you can't do any chatas. How many oila can I do? Well, I think maybe I'll do 3. 2 for the guests and 1 for the original. No. You can't do more than 1. Because since you can't identify them, if you do one oila, you're safe, because that's the allotment of the original group. But if you do more than one oila, you might be encountering his teammate, his counterpart, the second of that original pair, which can't be an oila, it's got to be a chatas. So 3 birds are doomed. There's no other option. Continues the Mishnah. When does this formula hold true? So it's referring to that last case, and likewise the previous case as well, but it's just, for clarity, it's just going back to that second case in that previous Mishnah, which was the second of 2 cases which were identical, just the reverse. So so you have the nadava, which means the oila birds that got mixed into the chayva, the unspecified pair or pairs. In that case, we have to limit based on the original allotment within that unspecified group. But here comes a new scenario. Aval b'chayva shenisarva zubazu. Let's say it's chayva mixed into more chayva. So as we explained, chayva means a pair which contains a potential chatas, a potential oila. Okay, it's mixed to another identical type of pair of birds. So you have, let's say, 2 into 2. These 2 are meant to be one chatas, one oila, and these 2 are meant to be one chatas, one oila. So Rachel's pair jumped into Leah's cage. Now we have 4 birds. So again, you have to take on the worst possible scenario. You have to be as safe as you can be. So what happens? What's the formula here? Very similar to the previous Mishnah. You can't take any chance, you can't take any risks. So the formula will be 50%. Half of the total number of birds can be processed properly. Let's play it out in a very simple scenario. Let's say we have 2 birds with 2 more birds. Now we have a total of 4. What's the maximum allowable? Only half, 2. One is a chatas, one is an oila, because even if you've encountered Rachel's pair, meaning the chatas and oila you processed will both belong to Rachel, you're still safe, because that was her maximum. That was her allowable limit. One chatas, one oila. But if you go and do another one, you do 3. Let's say you do 2 chatas and 2 chatas. Maybe you've encountered. Maybe both those were Rachel's. She doesn't have more than an allowance of 1 chatos. So we have to take into account the worst possible scenario. And if that's the case, in this type of situation where it's equal numbers, you work with the 50% formula. Half is okay, the other half is doomed. And then she'll play it out in numbers. So you have one pair over here. Let's say you have Rachel and Leah, right? So achas lezu, 1 pair belonging to Rachel, v'achas lezu, 1 pair belonging to Leah. And now they're mixed together. You have 4 in total. Or shtaim lezu, 2 pairs belonging to Rachel, mixing up with 2 pairs belonging to Leah, or 3 and 3, shalosh lezu. In all these situations, mechza kosher, mechza pasul, half can be processed, but half is pasul. Suppose the numbers are unequal. Now it gets a bit more complex, but again, it's a very simple idea. We keep to the maximum, which is allowable in the original set of birds. Achas lazu, ushtaim lazu, shalosh lazu, vesel lazu. You have a lineup of women. She came with 1 pair, the other one came with 2 pairs, next one with 3, next one with 10 pairs. Lots of birds. Well, males, the other one with 100 pairs of birds. You have 200 and something birds here, all mixed together in 1 cage. Let's think. So how many are okay? How many are kosher? Just 2. The number belonging to Rachel, the first woman who had just 1 pair, you can't go past that point. That's the only way to play it safe. Take out 1 pair of this 230 something mix up. 1 pair, One will be a chatas, one an oila, and that's it. You can't do more. Because anything more than that, you're running a risk. Let's say you do, even add one more, do 2 chatas and 1 oila. Maybe those 2 chatas belong to Rachel, who contributed 1 pair to this mix-up, and her 1 pair is meant to be 1 chatas, 1 oila. You can't do a double chatas. So the only way to play it safe is to only allow the smallest number, to ensure that you don't exceed that limit of that pair of birds, of that group of unspecified birds. Hamuat kosher. The smallest number is kosher. Now all this applies whether it's, the birds brought for the same reason or different reasons, one woman, many women, doesn't matter. There's a mix-up, we treat them all equally. Bein Mishem Echad, whether they're brought for the same occasion, or Bein Mishnei Shemus for different reasons, she gave birth, she was a Zava, Bein Mishem Echad, or all belonging to the same woman, but Bein Mishnei Noshim, or a different woman. Kate said Mishem Echad, what's an example of one event, Leida V'Leida, both bringing on account of a birth, or Ziva V'Ziva, that's Mishem Echad. What's Mishnei Shemus on account of 2 events? Leida V'Ziva, she's bringing for Leida, she's bringing V'Ziva, it all runs the same system. Kate Mishnei Noshim, how does it work if it's 2 women? Alzu Leida, she's bringing on account of Leida, she's bringing on account of Leida, and they get mixed up. Alzu Ziva. That is when 2 women are bringing Mishem Echad for the same reason. Mishnei Shemus, 2 women for 2 different reasons. That's Alzu Leida, Alzu Ziva, she's bringing because of Leida, she's bringing because of Ziva, and they get mixed up. You got to go with the smallest number to play it safe. Rabbi Yossi, here comes an interesting halacha. Shtei nashim shalachos k'neim be'erev. 2 women put down $100. Let's go buy some birds together. And they brought, a bunch of birds for both. Or they handed the money to the kayin for the birds. Let him take care of it. So what happens? It's unlabeled. It's unnamed. No worries. It's up to the kayin. It's up to the discretion. When he gets around to doing the akrava, he'll decide, okay, this is for the chatas, this is for the oila, this is for this woman, this is that woman. That's the halacha. The kayin can designate them and label them as he's being makar of them. It doesn't matter what the reason for the carbon is, bein Mishem Echad, whether it's all for the same reason, bein Mishnei Shemus for different reasons. He has the ability, he's authorized to label them and designate them accordingly. Hadron l'chatasayif. Okay, fairly simple parak. Gets a bit more complex as we proceed, but it's the recurring theme. Keep within the limits. So if we have some sort of mix-up, we always have to account for the sort of the worst possible scenario, worst possible situation, which is stick with the bare minimum, which is the sort of the limit, allowable limit on that original group. And if you do that, you're safe. Okay, let's recap the parak. The chatas ha'if is meant to be processed down on the bottom. Chatas ha'if l'mala. An oif can be brought either as neder or nedava. Neder is a personal vow. Nedava is more of an item-based vow for which he's not responsible. If something happens, the chayva is a pair of birds comprised of chatas and oila. Can be left unspecified until the akrava, but you can't rearrange the proportions. It has to be one for chatas, one for oila. You can decide which one is which, but of the 2, one is chatas, one is oila. We discussed a definite chatas getting mixed into an oila mixed into a chatas. They're both doomed. You can't deviate. You can't change the format of the akrava. A labeled chatas jumped into an unspecified pair, so you can't do any oila. Just in case you encounter the chatas. How many chatas can you do? Only one, based on the allotment with the original unspecified group. You can't exceed that. And the same would happen with the oila jumping into a pair of chayva. When it's chayva and chayva, so if it's equal amounts, we can do half properly, sticking with this formula of sticking within the maximum allotment. If it's uneven numbers, so you have to work with the smallest group and make sure you stay within the limits of that allotment. And all this applies whether it's for the same reason or different events, one woman or many women. And we had a halacha Rabbi Yossi that you can specify, you can label them as you are being makar of them. Okay, all the best to you, and that's lacha.